Welcome back, everyone. It is my pleasure to kick off our traditional ACONA Innovation Round Table. Design thinking, negotiation campaigns, and new ideas for nuclear diplomacy. Again, my name is Arvid. I'm a member of the ACONA Executive Board. And the point of this exercise here is to take it a little bit further to then reflecting on the past and thinking, based on what we learned, what we know, what are some creative ideas, negotiation tactics, new concepts that could maybe move us a little bit away from the abyss of collapsing arms control agreements all around us, and that could put the international community back on a track towards maybe a new generation of arms control agreements. And we will do this in the following way. I will very briefly always introduce the respective speaker, and that speaker will have about 2 or 3 minutes to present an innovative idea that came up either as part of their work on the ACONA team, as a team member, or during their time with us as an ACONA fellow. Again, I will make these introductions when we get to the speakers. And after each innovative proposal, I will ask Ambassador Turner to briefly react. And so we will get a candid assessment from the ambassador in terms of, does that even work? Or is that really just lofty thinking that would have no chance of becoming reality? So that's the idea of the exercise. And if we have time for questions, then you can all weigh in. So let's start. Our first speaker is Dr. Mariana Budjeryn, who is a senior research associate with the project on managing the atom at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard Kennedy School. She is also a founding mother of ACONA, of course, has been with the team right from the very beginning, and she has written a wonderful book that you should all read called Inheriting the Bomb. So, Mariana, you not only led one of our ACONA design thinking sessions with our fellows, and so you will tell us a little bit about what was the topic, what was the creative idea, but you're also coming just out of 1 week of boot camp work with our fellows from all around the world. So maybe kick us off a little bit, what's on your mind at this moment, and then what did your group come up with, please?
Great, thank you all so much, and let me just say, it's always such a pleasure to be here and to conclude this this boot camp every year with the conference and see all of your faces, all of our guests arrive all the way from wherever they are to Iceland, and to see this, something that started as an idea, actually come to fruition, and all of you here. So this is wonderful. Before I start reflecting on the design thinking exercise, let me just say, as many of you know, I am originally from Ukraine. There has been quite a representation of Ukrainians here in this conference and the boot camp, and I always take any opportunity to thank all of you who in your thoughts and your deeds and your efforts have extended support to Ukraine in this hour of need. And I also want to acknowledge the Russian participants in this boot camp, and also our long-term supporter and partner and ally, Pavel Palashchenko, who's been behind this project, part of this project from the very beginning, who always make an effort, even at these difficult times, to come and engage in conversations. We imagine it can be particularly easy in this time. So I'd just like to acknowledge that. Our design thinking exercise task was to come up with the solution of how to negotiate a New START follow-on during the war in Ukraine. So the idea of the whole design thinking exercise is to take something really difficult and to try.
And very briefly, for those who are not arms control buffs, what is the New START Treaty?
Okay, so New START Treaty is a treaty between the United States and Russia that limits, has reduced and limited a number of strategic nuclear arms. It came into force in 2010, and it's due to expire, has been extended already once, and is due to expire in February 2026, at which point the world might, for the first time in decades, face the kind of situation where the two major nuclear possessors, the United States and Russia, that still collectively possess 90% of nuclear arms, are unconstrained by any arms control treaty. So the intractable problem is, how is it that we do it, assuming that the war in Ukraine will go on, which is a very realistic prospect, until at least 2026. And given that already any overtures towards arms control engagements have been unproductive, have been unsuccessful. It seems that the Russian Federation is linking its willingness to engage in arms control negotiations to Western support for Ukraine. So they're saying, stop sending arms to Ukraine, and then we'll see what happens. And then on the US side, there's an interest, and has been an interest, of engaging China in whatever next round of arms control, strategic arms control negotiations that might happen. At the same time, there's kind of great pressure from non-nuclear weapon states, especially those who are party to TPNW, to the ban treaty, to really see further reductions in nuclear arsenals of nuclear possessors. So there's kind of this really mounting tension within the global nuclear order. So we brainstormed at what could possibly be a solution to this intractable arms control program. And what we have come up with is an idea for a new treaty, code name Fresh Start, named courtesy of Karina Tuzinski. That's her. And this will be a treaty that will involve 5 parties. It will be a P5 treaty. So the United States, the Russian Federation, China, UK, and France will be bound by this new treaty. Now, because, as you well understand, the force levels of these 5 nuclear possessors are drastically different at this point, even though we know China is building up its strategic forces. Certainly by February 2026, currently it will not be on a par with the US and Russia. So we thought that the treaty should have a differential treatment of the different parties. By the terms of the treaty, which will be, and I'm just kind of adding that on, we didn't discuss it, but I suggest it be, say, a 10-year treaty. So by the end of the 10-year term, the United States and Russia together would commit to reduce their strategic nuclear arms to 100 deployed strategic nuclear warheads, and also be allowed to retain 500 non-deployed strategic nuclear warheads. That would result in an overall reduction of upwards of 1,000 nuclear weapons in the world, right? So that's a good thing. China would observe a limit, a cap, to its buildup, right? We judged that whether there is a treaty or there is not treaty, China is building up, and there's very little that we can do about it. China will be allowed to build up to 1,000 strategic nuclear warheads, but without any non-deployed. So US and Russia would still have an edge in being able to upload and have that upload potential should China go on to break out of these limits, right? So that'd be one of the points of leverage. UK and France would observe a freeze at current levels. Beyond that, the treaty would include notifications and data exchanges. We'll not call it transparency since that will be a trigger word, but there is a good template and already a practice, long-standing practice of mutual notifications and data exchanges. The treaty would also include on-site inspections. Those will be differential, so US, Russia, and China would commit to host more inspections, certainly to account for their larger force, while France and UK would host fewer ones, and we did not work out the details. Now, this treaty would deal only with strategic nuclear arms, so with a triad, let's put it that way, or whatever composition of force states have. That does leave out the controversial question of tactical nuclear weapons in Russia, but we decided not to let the great be the enemy of the good, and also not to let a good crisis go to waste. And with that, this is our idea.
Great. Excellent, sounds promising, but now this idea will meet reality in the form of the US Permanent Representative to the Conference on Disarmament. So, Ambassador Turner, what do you have to say about this?
I like the title a lot. Fresh start. It's very interesting. I mean, and there's a certain logic to it, obviously. And the P5 do meet, and this is something that theoretically they could do. I would note that historically, all the arms control agreements that we have negotiated with the Soviet Union and then with Russia, these tend to be bilateral arrangements first. It takes a lot to get, it would probably take a lot to get to a point of agreement with Russia, and then we would have to probably then do the same thing with China. The other aspect that I think that would be somewhat of concern to us is now that Russia and China are aligned, potentially against the United States, that may affect how you look at numbers. It may affect how the negotiations would go, because the two of them would have opportunities to coordinate their positions in a way that we might not. In terms of the French and UK deterrence, we heard a story earlier today that they would not want, and I think that's still the case, they would not want their deterrence to be included in an agreement affecting the three other countries. So it's not a bad idea. I just don't know. It would take a lot of work and a lot of goodwill to get there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for this candid assessment. So let's see what you have to say about the next idea. So now we will hear from Sascha Hach, also one of the founders of ACONA. He is a research associate with Peace Research Institute Frankfurt, one of the ACONA consortium partner organizations. And Sascha, so please tell us what your group of fellows worked on as part of the ACONA design thinking, and what you bring to us today.
Yes, thank you. So our task was to find out how to shield the NPT Review Conference 2026, so the next NPT Review Conference, from disinformation campaigns.
What is NPT?
And the NPT is the Nonproliferation Treaty, so the treaty that assures that the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, so the treaty that is intended to assure that nuclear weapons, briefly put, remain in the hands of the 5 possessor states defined by the treaties, which are also the members of the United Nations Security Council and will not spread elsewhere in the world. And so the review conferences are like conferences of debates and political conflicts, and this means also, conflicts of informations or discussions on informations, whether they are wrong or not, and they influence a lot the discussions and also the outcome, and pose a big problem at the conferences. So the group was developing a pretty impressive number of technical interventions to prevent an excessive spread of disinformation throughout an empathy exercise that was targeted at the client of our recommendations. So we wanted to develop a recommendation package, and the client was the president of the NPT Review Conference, who would then have to sell those recommendations to the member states of the NPT. But given that, one of the main insights is actually more a problem than a solution that I first have to mention, and this came out in our empathy exercise, given that our participants come from various backgrounds and they had to agree on those technical interventions. but they couldn't find common ground on whether disinformation is actually a commonly perceived problem among NPT member states. So is it really a problem of disinformation we are facing here, or is it not just about different perceptions of the reality of international relations, about contrasting understandings of what constitutes the truth or the truth? Or could it even be that disinformation campaigns in the NPT context are just a politically motivated invention of a certain group of states, namely mostly the Western states, in order to manipulate the discussions in their favor? Then the problem would not be how to contain disinformation campaigns, but how to contain spoiling allegations of disinformation campaigns in the conference. So in short, the workshop itself derailed in a crisis on whether the very topic of the exercise is of any relevance. But then there was a, let's say, diplomatic reality check. As we had already worked on the issue for more than 2 hours, something happened that usually happens, I think, in diplomacy. Even if you see a problem, you continue a little bit the business as usual. So the path dependency theory of international politics, and we decided to keep the fundamental epistemic problem in mind of what is truth and what is just perspective of a problem. But to go on searching for practical solutions to address the task. And what we found out then was actually that most of the measures we developed to counter disinformation could also be applied to verify or debunk false allegations of disinformation. So we could sell our product, our recommendation package, to both groups of states, those who assume or denounce disinformation campaigns, which usually are the more powerful nuclear weapon states and their allies, and those who believe that those allegations constitute themselves a strategy of manipulating the discussions in the NPT. And, just to give an example of this package, I think it's too large to mention every of its elements, was that in order to secure impartiality, we need a continuous fact-check mechanism applying to all member states equally, introducing specific quotas, meaning that a certain number of states has to agree that there is either a problem of disinformation or a problem of allegation of disinformation. And the quota has also to include like a representative element, meaning it cannot just be one UN regional group claiming this. But this also implies that we have to strengthen the capacities of the Secretariat and the President in order to implement those fact-finding mechanism. And what we actually proposed was to learn from other regimes that have already mechanisms in place of this kind of conflicts, like the Chemical Weapons Conventions with the OPCW, without creating another international organization or body alike in the NPT, because we already have the IAEA, which is concerned with technical monitoring. So for the political monitoring in the NPT, we have the NPT review cycle as a political monitoring mechanism. So basically boosting the multilateral components of the NPT, like the Secretariat or the President of the conference, for better institutional knowledge management and for implementing those fact-finding mechanisms. I will leave it to this package, which is still pretty broad.
I would say, wow, talk about an unsolvable problem, I think, in the final analysis. I sit in meetings every day where country X will make a statement about something that is totally false, that everyone knows is false. You may have organizations who have found that it was false, and it doesn't keep that country from continuing to make the very same assertion. And it's very hard then to prove one way or the other, and that's the whole purpose of disinformation. It's not about convincing the other side, it's about casting doubt on what is the actual case. There are targeted ways, and we spend a lot of our time, basically responding to allegations that we believe not to be truthful or not to be representative, and we tend to want to do that. These are the facts, this is the way it really is. But that's kind of as far as you can get. There's no judge sitting above us all who could determine what is true or what is not true. Fact checkers are subject to the same kinds of doubts about their objectivity and impartiality as anyone else. As anybody's read U.S. newspapers that do fact-checking about statements made by political candidates, you also have to look at what is the political trend of that particular newspaper. So it's a very difficult problem. A lot of it's out there in social media. The governments that are involved in disinformation are putting most of their information out actually in social media, not in intergovernmental bodies or in official conferences. And so, I don't see any prospect for an international authority that would find the truth of those things. But just one good example, we've talked a lot today about Ukraine. And as you know, I think as everybody knows, in the run-up to the actual Russian invasion, the United States had a lot of very detailed information about what the Russian plans were, which we shared with any number of governments, and many of which simply did not want to believe that it could be true, because they didn't want it to be true, so therefore it could not be true. But however, in those certain situations, I think the right kind of information put out at the right time can have an effect. But it's ultimately, it's time tells the truth, not the moment. Can I see? And just one last point, referring to the last proposal, your first proposal. One other thing I sort of failed to mention: if you want to bring China into an arms control regime, similar to what we've had with the Soviet Union, it's important to remember that the Chinese have absolutely zero experience when it comes to these kinds of things, zero traditions of letting people come in and inspect their facilities. As we heard earlier from our Chinese colleague, distrustful of transparency. So there's a whole education process that would have to take place. And I think, as our Chinese colleague also said, China is not the same as Russia. Their culture is different. And we're going to have to find different ways for dealing with these issues. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. So let's move on to our next speaker. So you heard from two ACONA team members. Now you're going to hear from two ACONA fellows. So first, Valeriia Hesse is a current ACONA fellow and also a non-resident fellow at the Odesa Center for Nonproliferation. And so she earned her spot on this panel because she won 2 of our internal ACONA awards. So as part of the ACONA program, our fellows engage in various negotiation exercises to hone their negotiation skills. And Valeriia took away the award during our last bootcamp for the most effective negotiator. So congratulations, and now you're with us. Yes. And so let me kick this off with a slightly different question. So now that you went through the ACONA program, so it's almost done, you did all the negotiations, you further improved your knowledge of negotiation and arms control. Do you want to share a little bit maybe how your thinking around negotiation and arms control has changed, if at all, through the ACONA program? So share a little bit about your journey and what's on your mind right now.
First of all, it is a great pleasure and a great honor to be an ACONA fellow in the first place, let alone be present here at this stage, so to say. And I think in the course of the whole fellowship, we acquired many things. And in order not to be very broad, I will pinpoint a couple of things that I have learned from our negotiation exercises, perhaps, for myself. One of the main things that I've noticed is it is great to have right people with right personalities at right places. However, if you end up in a position where you have to dial your personality down if it's bright and loud, or if you are in a position where you need to be more present and your original personality is more quiet, you have to do this. Otherwise, you can derail the whole process, which I might say that in the second negotiation exercise we have happened to me. Yeah, I was wrong. And another thing, when we are working in teams, it is important to have the internal convergence of views and clear division of roles and responsibilities. You might want, so basically, when the coordination within the team is better, the outcome of the negotiation definitely is better. And one of the reasons to have a clear assigned or selected leader who will have the final decision-making power is because when there are conflicting views that are put out on the table, and when they're internal and you're in discussion, it's perfectly fine, it's the process. However, when you go out there and have a confusion within your team and send confusing signals to the counterpart, they do not have a ground on which to stand, and they do not understand the zone of possible agreement, or ZOPA as we call it here. So it is important to preserve the roles and responsibilities and try to be amicable within the team and come up with a common position that at least you would present on the outside, because internally you still might not agree with things, but it is important to kind of set your person and your personal views aside if the majority settles for something different. Those are the lessons that I have learned from the negotiation exercise, and yeah, we can discuss it further.
Hey, thank you for sharing this. So let me actually ask you now, Ambassador Turner. So you are at the conference on disarmament, where probably Valeriia will join you in a couple of years and bring all her skills to the table. But do you have maybe a reaction to what she just shared about managing personalities, clear division of labor, of roles in delegations? Any reaction to that? Maybe even any additional advice or questions for Valeriia?
Well, just a couple of things in general. I mean, first of all, that's absolutely correct. At least within the U.S. government, coming up with a negotiation position to actually present in Geneva means that that position has been worked out already in Washington amongst, 3, 4, 5 different agencies. So it's important to have that negotiation first, and they come up with the instructions, and they have to agree on what those instructions are, and then they come out. And one of the reasons you have a head of delegation is because you have to have somebody who decides in the end how. I mean, the guidance may say X, Y, and Z, but somebody has to decide how that guidance is going to be deployed. What's the best way to deploy that guidance? Do you do it in stages? Do you do it all at once? Do you speak early to get your position out there so others clearly understand, or do you hold back and wait and see if you can influence the discussion in one way or another? So there are lots and lots and lots of different aspects to this. But one of the great things about diplomacy is that it's about people, and it's about the relationships you develop with other people, and it's extremely important that you be perceived as a credible interlocutor. So it's okay to say and diplomats do this all the time. This is what my instructions say, which is a way of saying this is what I have to say. Maybe there's some flexibility there, maybe there's not, maybe I disagree. I don't actually agree with this, but there are different ways to sort of to present your position in a truthful way that represents the guidance that you have, but also then to see, to explore where there might be some flexibilities and things like that. But somebody asked me today, what kind of relations do I have, for instance, with my Russian colleague in Geneva? What kind of relations do I have with my Chinese colleague in Geneva? The Chinese relationship at the moment is much simpler in the sense that I can invite him over and we can have a bilateral meeting, which we do from time to time. And clearly the U.S. and China have many differences on many subjects, but as long as we can trust each other to have a not straightforward, but a credible conversation about those issues, that's an advance. The way things are with Russia at the moment, I cannot invite a Russian over for a meeting. I cannot invite a Russian to a reception, et cetera, et cetera. But, we have been working together with Russians for so long that if there's an issue in the CD that we're working on, and I need to know what the Russian position is on this, or how far they can go, I can walk up to my Russian colleague and say, what is your, flexibility here? What are your options here? And sometimes that works. So it's a complicated process, but it's a great process. And if be yourself, be basically honest about what you're doing, and you'll do fine.
Excellent, thank you. And then lastly, let's hear from Tynchtykbek Israiilov, another current ACONA fellow. And your group, and yes, you're working for the OSCE in Kyrgyzstan. And your group won the second internal ACONA award for the most compelling ACONA policy brief. So congratulations to you and your colleagues. And so to give the ambassador another quick assignment here, tell us briefly what your group proposed. And I should say, for context, this is part of a larger research project that our fellows work on throughout their fellowship. So they produce a policy brief. So why don't you tell us briefly what the topic, what the idea is, and then we'll see what you have to say about it.
Thank you, Arvid. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues. In the beginning, I would like to using this opportunity to thank my fellow research group mates. It's Jonas, Halima, Kate for their incredible job in finalizing our joint paper. And I am really privileged to make our intervention on behalf of our group. In light of rapidly evolving landscape of international or artificial intelligence, our group has decided to develop a policy brief titled Artificial Intelligence in Nuclear Command and Control, Prospect for International Agreement to Keep Human in the Loop. Our policy paper delves into the complex interplay between artificial intelligence advancement and nuclear security, proposing avenues for collaborative action to maintain human oversight in critical decision-making processes. Integration of artificial intelligence into nuclear command, control, and communication systems presents both benefits and risks. While AI has the potential to enhance decision-making and reduce errors, it also raises concerns about strategic stability, accidental launches, as well as cyber vulnerabilities. Various countries have differing positions on AI integration, with some emphasizing human control over nuclear weapons decisions. Importantly, risks of excessive AI integration are not only specific to P5 nuclear weapons possessor states, but all nuclear weapons possessing states, including India, Pakistan, and Israel. Utilizing the Harvard negotiation method, our group explored the zone of possible agreement relating to an agreement to ensure human control over NC3 systems. We identified a joint statement between nuclear weapon states and AI developing countries about retaining human control of nuclear weapon systems. Such a non-legally binding joint statement could build trust and start conversations about how to mitigate risks associated with AI integration into NC3 systems. Framing this agreement to be among leading technology developers could bring a wider set of countries than P5 members, including countries without treaty-based nuclear weapons possession status. And the United Arab Emirates is recommended to host this process due to its budding AI development and its good diplomatic relations with all P5 countries. Key points for the proposed joint statement include affirming the importance of human control over nuclear command and control, endorsing transparency measures, and establishing temporary moratoriums on AI development in critical functions. The involvement of both nuclear and AI developing states is essential for comprehensive coverage. And in conclusion, the policy brief highlights the need for ongoing discussion on nuclear force modernization with a special focus on the impact of AI. And during the bootcamp, we have developed a special negotiation campaign to achieve this goal.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah. So then maybe as a quick follow-up question before you respond, Ambassador, then maybe briefly tell us right away, so you had this very interesting idea and you put together a policy brief, but then during the bootcamp you developed a specific negotiation campaign to turn this into a reality. So how would you go about this, or who should do what?
Okay, well, with our group, we sketched out a negotiation campaign that takes into account broader conversations around AI and presents an engagement plan that could bring all relevant states to the table. We identified the UK government as a recipient of our campaign. The UK is not only a P5 member, but has also been forward-leaning on arms control, and importantly was the host of recent AI Safety Summit at Bletchley Park. The UK could work in partnership with the United Arab Emirates to advance the UAE-hosted summit on the intersection of AI and nuclear technologies, and to advance a joint statement which includes a commitment for ensuring human control over nuclear weapons. Together, the UK and United Arab Emirates, alongside of France, could engage China and the United States to get their support for this summit and shape an early draft of the joint statement. Both countries were part of the Bletchley Summit and declaration. Importantly, this process would likely be most productive if mediated through the United Arab Emirates UK partnership rather than direct negotiation between China and the United States. After China has been brought in the table, the UAE and UK could leverage China's support to bring Russia into this summit and joint statement. Again, it will be critical here to frame this process as leading technology developers shaping the global impact of the convergence of AI and nuclear technologies. If Russia proves difficult to bring in at this stage, it could be worth bringing in a broader set of countries, including India and Pakistan, first, and then engaging Russia again, potentially through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Then a broader set of AI developing nations should be brought into this process, including Japan, Germany, and the Republic of Korea. As part of this broader group of nations, then also India, Pakistan, and Israel could be brought into this process in a way that leaves ambiguity over the nuclear weapon status. Also, there are few cross-cutting considerations for this negotiation campaign. Firstly, generally on the side of not going through established international fora, where existing dynamics might provide obstacles. Secondly, the US election. Depending on the outcome, there is a flexibility to bring in the United States earlier or later into the process. Third, publicity can be used in a positive way, where the message of leading technology developers shaping the future of these critical technologies can be used to incentivize participations. Once P5 members have started engaging, the summit can be announced and then provide a forcing function for agreeing statement.
Excellent, thank you. So indeed, a full negotiation campaign mapped out for you. I should also highlight, if I'm not mistaken here, this group of fellows included fellows from Pakistan, the UK, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia, and they were all indeed able to agree on one joint paper. So congratulations for pulling that off. So what is your reaction to this ambitious plan?
I mean, very, very interesting. It is very ambitious and it is very intricate, and that it becomes an issue in itself. My comment is a broader one. When it comes to artificial intelligence and control of nuclear, command and control of nuclear weapons, this is an extremely important decision for any country ever to take to actually authorize use of a nuclear weapon in a specific situation. For the United States, only the president can make that decision. And I suspect that this situation is very much the same for counterpart countries, which implies then that there, in a very real way there is human control of the use of nuclear weapons. Now, that's sort of the broader reality, I think, that we're dealing with. But that said, AI has tremendous potential at any number of levels below that of affecting then how war is going to be conducted, and bringing up questions of how autonomous weapons are used. This is all being discussed in a GGE on laws in the UN right now, mainly through the optic of humanitarian international law. And then Washington, the United States has a political declaration on military use of AI. So it's clearly one of these subjects that's going to be talked about a lot, and to what degree you have to have a human in the loop in terms of how you design these, and how there are differences of interpretation of what is autonomous, what is not autonomous, to what extent. I think in the nuclear realm, where it could become really, really dangerous, is when you get new weapons where the amount of time that you have to make a decision becomes shorter and shorter. That's where you have a risk that automation, i.e. artificial intelligence, then becomes the solution, because it's happening too quickly for humans to make that kind of a decision.
Okay, so we have time probably for 1 or 2 questions that we're going to bundle, and then we move to Ambassador Turner's keynote. So if you have any questions to Mariana about Fresh Start, Sascha about shielding the NPT from disinformation, or Valeriia about her negotiation experience, or Tynch about AI nuclear command and control, this is your chance. Any question or reaction? I see Ian, and then we will bundle this with a question in the very back. Let's get both questions right away. Yes.
Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to ask my question. My question is for Valeriia. Based on your experience during your ACONA experience, how did you navigate writing your policy paper, and how did you come to as a group, how did you come to the idea of redefining success on the NPT?
Okay, let's get in the second question in the back there.
Hello, this is Shanila Tariq. I'm from Moderator Institute in Monterey. So my question is, it was a very interesting negotiation campaign, and while negotiating on multilateral arms control, you added all those P5. I was just wondering why you didn't add other countries which has nuclear weapons. There might be a reason. And a very interesting negotiation campaign on AI. I was just wondering what could be the possible challenges you see in the implementation of this negotiation campaign. Have you worked on that, or just your general idea what could be the challenges when you see the implementation? Thank you.
Okay, Valeriia, why don't you start?
Thank you so much for the question. And indeed, working in this research group was kind of the highlight of not only thinking and learning about negotiation, but also trying to implement it both within the group work and for the results of our paper. And so when we were working out a strategy, okay, we all were interested in the NPT and with the upcoming NPT review conference. Sascha already explained what it is, so I'm not going to delve into that. We were trying to think within the current context of conflict, where we can draw experience and to make the next NPT review cycle more successful. And we focused on similarly strained time period, not exactly the same, but we contrasted the 1980 versus 1985 experience, and tried to find the key point that we would learn from it. One of the key points turned out to be acknowledging dissent within the negotiation party's negotiation table. And so within our policy brief, we actually ranged the courses of action from the worst possible to the best possible, and realized that with our understanding of the current situation, the middle ground could be found through acknowledging dissent, even if this document is not adopted by a consensus. Consensus itself should not define success. The success is in providing strong language that would allow us to move the conversation forward and to move the regime forward, rather than just having the final document that is adopted by by consensus, which can be very weakly phrased, which was the current course of action of the so-called successful conferences in the last couple of years. It is important to acknowledge dissent and maybe reflect it in something alternative, like an information circular that would be reflecting the positions that is an unofficial document.
Great, thank you. And Mariana, why don't you take on the question about the P5 and beyond? And we only have time for that one question, and then we will wrap up, please.
Right. So a very good question, right? There's 9 nuclear possessors in the world, and all of those ultimately should be included in some kind of a treaty. We thought that P5, well, for starters, it's also the N5 under the NPT, and these are the states that are bound by Article 6 and their obligation to conduct negotiations in good faith. So that would be fulfilling all of their obligations under Article 6 of the NPT, but also setting, it would already be very difficult, as Ambassador Turner rightly pointed out, to take the process that was traditionally bilateral and then expand it to 5 parties. It's going to be a very challenging set of negotiations, but if successful, it could be used as a template and as an example to then broaden it to all 9 nuclear possessors. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So one final announcement for everyone here. So if you thought some of these ideas were really interesting, in a couple of weeks or so after this boot camp, you will find our fellows' policy briefs on the ACONA website. So if you want to learn more about it, just go to the ACONA website and find out everything about it. So now, in a couple of seconds, all of us but the ambassador will vacate this podium here, and then we hear our keynote on the future of nuclear diplomacy by Ambassador Turner. And so please join me and thank our wonderful panelists.